So today is actually my birthday. Well, my American birthday is February 14th. That's when my mother learned about Valentine's Day. But my Jewish birthday, which is the one I celebrate according to the Hebrew calendar, comes out today. And to celebrate my birthday, I decided to dedicate this class in memory of my parents, since they're the ones that gave me life. So that's what this class is all about. The topic is finding joy and strength in the face of challenge. It says, according to the Torah, joy is the key to our neshama. Joy is actually the key that opens up our soul. And joy is a very pleasant feeling, and it could unlock personal strength that a person never knew they had. It says that happiness is an obligation. Many people think that happiness is a right, is a birthright. Many people think that happiness is something that's a wonderful thing to attain. But the truth is, it says, Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha, that happiness is our obligation. And it's first of all obligation to God, because God created every single person with a purpose. And when we're in a bad mood, and when we're depressed, and when we're down, it zaps up all our energy, and we have no vitality, we have no energy. When a person is exhausted, because literally it takes away our energy, we can't fulfill our mission to its complete. And that's why we have an obligation to God to be happy. We also have an obligation to ourselves, because we have a much better quality of life when we're happy. And we have an obligation to our family, because I know when I'm not happy, I'm not a very nice person to be around. And probably many people feel the same way. We can ask our kids, how it is to have an unhappy mommy. So it's really an obligation. Now, it says that if happiness is an obligation, then how come depression is not one of the sins? There's a list in the Torah of what's prohibited. It doesn't say you are not allowed to be depressed. And if we have an obligation to be happy, then it should say that we are not allowed to be depressed. And our rabbis say that depression is not a sin, but the damage that depression can cause is greater than any other sin can cause. And that's why it's not on the list. Because depression is much worse than any sin. It takes you away from doing mitzvot. So that's why it's so severe. Now, everything that God does is for the good. The reason I put this down is because some of us can think, how could I always be happy when I have so much pain and so much suffering in my life? But we are told that if God is good, then everything God does is good, even though we don't see it as good. So there's something called good to our eyes and something called good. Like when I clean my baby's face and I'm scrubbing it, he's screaming and yelling and doesn't like it. When you don't let a child cross the street, they're very upset. They don't perceive it as good, but we know that we're doing what's best for them. And the same thing, this world is such a large world. There's a whole bigger world out there, and we don't see this world from God's vantage point. So everything God does is good, although we don't perceive it as good. There was once a rabbi who was having a gathering. And he asked the people, if you were God, how would you run the world? And everybody was very excited. They went around the room and everyone was saying the amazing things that they would do if they were God, and exactly how they would run it, and what unbelievable kindness programs they would do. And then after they went around, somebody asked the rabbi, you asked us this question, now why don't you answer it? If you were God, how would you run this world? And he said, I would run it exactly the same way as God runs it. Because if I were God, I would see things the same way as God sees it. I would see it from his vantage point, and I would run the world that way too. There's a famous parable of an experiment that was done, that there was a husband and wife that were locked in a cellar, and they were told that they have to stay there for life. And in this experiment, they wanted to see how these people would come out. Would they come out normal without having society and any social life? That they would stay in a cellar their whole life. And there was a window, and they kept on feeding every single day. They were given everything they needed. all their needs were provided through this window. There was a pulley, and the husband and wife would open the window, and their breakfast, lunch, and supper were served to them, and all their fresh clothing. And when their clothing got soiled, they send it out the window, and that's how they lived. Well, eventually this couple ended up having children. They had a son and a daughter. And one time the little boy and girl are having a conversation with each other, and the girl says to her brother, "How come the fish is burned today?" And the brother asked the sister, "How come the fish is burned today?" And the sister says, "Well, let's see. Well, when Mom opened the window to get the fish, maybe she didn't pull the pulley well, and maybe it banged a little bit into the window, and that's how the fish got burned." And they were trying to figure out if maybe when they took the food from the window, the way they took it from the window caused the food to be burned. And the parents overheard, and they were shocked. And they said, "Our dear children, don't you know that there's a whole world out there? There's an ocean, and there's a fisherman, and there's a fish store, and there's a cook who's cooking this food." And it was beyond their grasp. They couldn't imagine that there was a world out there. To them, the world was the cellar that they lived in. The parents knew otherwise because they once upon a time lived in the world. But the boy and girl were born in the cellar, and this is the only life that they knew. And it just was beyond their grasp. They couldn't relate that there was a whole world out there. And we, to a certain extent, are like that boy and girl. We, live in this world, we're put into this world, and we don't realize that there's a whole big world. This is like just a little cellar, and that everything that happens to us is coming from God, and God controls everything. And it's not like that, that you had a flood in your house today because your pipe burst. It happened because that's what God wanted. Rabbi Greenberg's sister had two terrible tragedies. She lost her daughter in her 30s. The girl was in her 30s and left a whole bunch of orphans. And then a few years later, her 16-year-old grandson was also in a car accident. She lost a daughter and a different daughter's son, both to car accidents. And when I asked Rabbi Greenberg's sister, "How do you deal with it?" She said, "The only way I deal with it is I tell myself that my daughter and grandson didn't die by accident in an accident. Because otherwise I'd live with guilt my whole life, knowing, why did I let my daughter drive that car? She didn't have snow tires, and it was just regular tires, and maybe my grandson wasn't seatbelted. You keep on thinking I could have prevented, and all the guilt that you live with. When she accepts that it happened because this was God's plan, and that day that her 16-year-old son died was the day that his life was meant to be over. And if it wasn't through the car accident, then it's possible that the angel of death would make him not wake up in the morning. And if it wasn't that way, it could have been some other thing that happened. But if that was the day that his life was over, the angel of death has many ways to take a person, and it could have been through a different method." And this is her comfort, knowing that although she cannot understand why this happened, but she knows that there is a greater reason. It's interesting that we see many people that did not survive, that survived the Holocaust like unbelievably. They survived the Holocaust with flying colors, and they came out believing so strongly in God. Yet these same people just need to lose their car keys, and they lose their mind. And you wonder, you survived the Holocaust, and you lose yourself by losing your keys. And the truth is, it's very simple, because when something as great as a Holocaust happens, a person must let go. They realize it's beyond their reach. It's not anything that they can do. So they let go. Now, let go doesn't mean giving up. And let go doesn't mean lazy, I'm not taking responsibility, I'm letting go, and it's beyond my reach, so I don't have to do anything. Let go means I'm giving the power over to God. I realize that there's a greater force, and I'm letting God control this world. And it's an unbelievable comfort when you let God in. I mean, sometimes when I have a difficult day with one of my children, I say, look, there's three partners in creation. There's a mother, a father, and God. And I invite God in, and, it's your responsibility as much as mine. And that's the only way we could move forward. I also want to mention that in dealing with challenges, that sometimes we make too much calculations, and that's why it's so difficult. I remember when my daughter Chayvushka was 4 months old. She was 4 months old, and I had 3 kids, all under the age of 3. And my mother was then too ill, so we drove with our whole family to Brooklyn to make Pesach for her. And I suddenly, 3 days before Pesach, got hit by a car. The car came out of nowhere, a 16-year-old driver. And I was in a cast for a few weeks. And physically, I couldn't keep up. I couldn't keep up with 3 kids under 3 years old. And it was the first time that it really dawned on me, how did my mother run after 8 kids? Because my mother was handicapped her whole life. The mother I knew was always on crutches, and she had these brace shoes. She was born healthy, and shortly before her 2nd birthday, she contracted the polio virus. The vaccine came out when she was, I think, 3 years old, like a year later. And her legs were paralyzed her whole life. So I thought she must have some good advice to give me. So I called her up and I said, I can't keep up. Ita is just toilet trained and gives me like 30 seconds notice that she has to go to the bathroom. Mushka's nursing and Hillel's Hillel. So how did you do it? So she said, come to think of it, I don't know. I never thought about it. And I said, what do you mean you never thought about it? How did you cook dinner every night and clean the house and do homework with all of us? How did you keep up with everything? And she says, I don't know. I just woke up every day and I just did what I had to do. And when she said that, I realized that that's how she managed. I said, so you gave me good advice. You don't make calculations. You just do what you have to do. There's the funny joke on the same line of Jacob, who's walking down the street and he meets a rabbi with a long white beard, and he goes over to the rabbi and he says, tell me, Rabbi, when you sleep at night, do you sleep with your beard over your blanket, or do you sleep with your beard tucked in under your blanket? And the rabbi says, I don't know. I have no idea how I sleep. He says, it can't be. You have a beard already for at least 40 years. You have no idea what you do with your beard at night. Do you keep it over the blanket or under? And the rabbi said, I don't know. Well, that night he couldn't fall asleep all night because he put his beard under his blanket and it just felt very uncomfortable. So then he put it over his blanket and that just didn't feel right too. And whatever he did wasn't comfortable. And that's when he realized that sometimes if you make calculations and too much thinking involved, life becomes too complicated. So the best thing is just, to stay focused on what you have to do. And, we do that all the time. I'm running on only 3 hours of sleep. There's no way I'm going to manage. Like, all of that negative talk and thought process is what causes us to slow down and wears us out. I purposely made an outline because I usually jump off my outline, so I'm trying to keep with it. One way to help you start the day in a joyous way is to start your day with the Moda'ani. The Moda'ani is an 8-second prayer that we start our day right away and we thank God that we're alive, and we take that moment of meditation to think not what we don't have, but what we do have in life. And these first words of the day are like the trunk of the tree that all the branches of that day are going to come out of. Now, the Moda'ani is a brilliant prayer and it's a meditation of its own. Actually, in a few weeks from now, and I put that information on the back of the paper, Rabbi Greenberg is going to give a whole class dedicated to the Moda'ani, and it's a whole meditation class to learn that meditation, how to start your day in the right way. Then, on the same note, a Jewish person is also given another gift that besides starting your day in the right way, it's important to end your day in the right way. And we end our day with the Shema. And when we say the Shema, if you open up a prayer book and read in the English, not just the paragraph that you've learned in Sunday school, the actual paragraph of Shema, but the bedtime Shema in a prayer book, you'll see that it's a very therapeutic prayer. The first paragraph starts out with forgiveness, where you are declaring that you forgive anybody that offended you that day, so that you can go to sleep without any anger and without any pain. And then you slowly declare in the Shema that everything that happened to you that day happened, everything that happened today all happened from one God, and it's one God that controlled everything that happened to you today. And then slowly you re-entrust your soul to God, and tomorrow is a brand new day and a new beginning. So again, this is so important for us to start our day and end our day in the same way. The ultimate happiness formula is being able to trust in Hashem, because some things are beyond our understanding and we can't understand it. So the only way for us to have that comfort is to know that there is a reason, and it says that when Mashiach will come, we'll know the reason behind all the pain and sorrow that we had to go through, and we'll even thank God for pain that He gave us in the same way as we thank God for all the blessings and kindness that He gave us. It's important in talking about how to be joyous. It's important for us to edit our speech. Just like you edit when you write, it's important to edit your speech. And that you talk joyously and you also act joyously. And even the self-talk is important it's very important to say it in a positive way. For me, one of my biggest challenges is patience. And what's unbelievable, that I find unbelievable, is that I find myself to be a better parent and a more patient parent with 7 kids than I was with 2 kids. And I really do believe that it's something that if you work on yourself, you could stretch. Just like when you do exercise, you are more fit. You could stretch your emotional endurance. When I run up and down the steps, sometimes just twice, I'm out of breath already. I know that physically I'm not in shape. And there are other people that can run 5 miles and they're not out of breath. So clearly, when you exercise, you have a longer endurance. The same thing emotionally. When you exercise your emotions and you work hard to practice that endurance, you do end up having a greater tolerance. It's interesting that even brain-wise, you could exercise your brain muscles. Last year, I had a student in the 2nd grade who was not a hyper child, but she had a serious attention issue. And the mother tried to put her onto Ritalin, and the side effects didn't pay. The side effects, for many kids, medication is a gift. But for this child, the medications gave her more side effects than the attention. Well, anyway, she took her to Toronto. I don't know the details, but there is some type of brain exercise that this alternative doctor does there. And this girl, it's just unbelievable because the mother did not share this with me. And I taught her last year. By December, I said to the mother, it's unbelievable. What did you do? Her focus is unbelievable. And she says, we've been doing 20 minutes of brain exercises every day, and my daughter's focus is unbelievable. I asked her to give me an example of what a brain exercise could be. And she said the simple game that I grew up with, the paddle ball, with that paddle that you hit the ball, and she had to do it for 10 minutes, and she had to focus, and then when it got easy and it wasn't a challenge, she had to paddle upwards, and that eye and hand coordination and that focus. She also was given a lot of mazes, puzzles, but just doing that every day just increased and strengthened those brain muscles, so to speak, that helps a child with attention. So definitely on all levels, our brain, our emotions, and physically, you can't just give up on yourself and say, look, my temperament is that I'm an emotional person, I'm a moody person, and this is not going to work for me, because we all can definitely work on ourselves. So initially, when I started doing the self-talk about patience, first I would tell myself in my self-talk as a problem, I don't have patience. And then I decided, well, we have to take a problem and make it into a goal, because that's what we're supposed to do in life. All our problems are supposed to become goals. So I kept on saying every time people were too slow, I'm from Brooklyn, things are on the fast lane. And every time, things just didn't work the way I expected it to, I said, I'm trying to have patience. Now I find myself saying, I'm becoming more patient. I have more patience. So you see, and it's not even conscious, but you see slowly that progression, that when you speak positively to yourself, even your self-talk has to be positive. And if you're not in a good mood, it says, there's the Hebrew saying, "Mitaych shalai lishma ba lishma," which is fake it till you make it. And this is, there was a great rabbi already in the 1700s who told us about this, and I think all psychologists are saying that it does work. There's no question about it, that if you pretend to be, in a certain mood, eventually you'll be that way. And for those who are very honest people and say, well, isn't that dishonest? We know that moodiness and bad moods are definitely contagious. So the same way as we don't send our kids to school when they're sick because it wouldn't be fear to pass on the germs, the same way we shouldn't be so righteous about it's not honest for us to pretend that we're in a good mood when we're not, because we owe it to those around us that we shouldn't pass our negative attitude and negative mood, because it's definitely contagious. I'm not going to give a class on this now because I'm not an expert, but I did write Take a Deep and Slow Breath. There are many people that classes and places where you can learn that actual breathing techniques definitely could help a person relax. I never believed in it until I was in labor, and my labor coach helped me breathe slowly, and then I realized that there definitely is something to it. What does it mean, reframe it? It all depends on how you see it. Sometimes the same exact situation could be seen in two different ways, and that makes the whole difference. I remember the first time I ever spoke publicly was when I was a senior in 12th grade. I was 16 years old, and I spoke in front of a big crowd, and I was very nervous. And as I was saying my speech, there was this one person in the crowd that kept on correcting me on these little technical mistakes, and it was very frustrating. And when I finished speaking, this was, I was a 16-year-old kid for the first time speaking in front of over 100 people. Afterwards, I was very frustrated why that person had to do it. And then suddenly it dawned on me, that's a good sign. It means that somebody was really listening to every word I said, because otherwise, how did they correct all those little technical mistakes? And it was unbelievable how that reframing, that's a sign that everybody is really listening to every word I said. Just that different way, that different twist of looking at it made all the difference. I have this article that I like that I'm going to read to you talking about reframing. In the village of the old country, many people were illiterate. And if they needed to write a letter, they would go to the town scribe. One woman whose son had immigrated to the United States had not heard from her son for several months and asked a scribe to write a letter for her. And this is the letter she dictated to the scribe to write for her. Dear son, I'm sorry that I have not heard from you for several months. Please write me and let me know how things are going for you. With me, things are quite well. We have had a difficult winter, and the cold wind would come through the crevices in the wall, but thank God I was able to seal the crevices with old garments. The price of food has gone up very high, but thank God a day-old bread is much cheaper, and I can afford this. I still have my house cleaning job, and thank God that at my age I'm still able to do this kind of work. I'm anxiously waiting to hear from you. Love, Mother. The woman then asked the scribe to read what he had written. The scribe, who was outraged at the son's neglect of his mother, wrote as follows. Dear son, what in the world is wrong with you that you have not written to me? Conditions here are intolerable. The icy wind blows through the crevices of the wall, and I have to try and stuff them with rags. I can't afford proper food, and I have to eat day-old bread. At my old age, I still have to get onto my hands and knees and scrub floors in order to survive. This is the kind of life I'm leading here, while you seem to be enjoying yourself in America. When the scribe finished reading the letter, the woman grabbed hold of her head with her hands and said, Oy vey, I never knew how bad life was until now. So it's not necessary to change conditions. Sometimes all that's needed is to change our perspective. And, events happen to us, and it's not in our control. But the truth is, there's two things that causes a person pain. The event that happens to them, and then their evaluation of the event. Because the way you evaluate the event, that is what's going to create your emotional reaction. if your evaluation is that it was a terrible thing that happened and the person was just so unfair, how dare that person do this to you, then you're going to automatically create a very negative emotional reaction. If you tell yourself it wasn't so bad, or it was great, or it was okay, then the reaction won't be as bad. So it's important for us to try to evaluate things in the most positive way possible so that we could experience happiness and have relief. I put down here, lower your expectations. I think that many of us, as we get older or as more children come into the family, we just automatically do that. But it's really true that people that have less expectations just have a much easier time in life. If you have to do it, then why not do it with joy? There's certain things, like laundry, you know. You don't like laundry, but you have to do it. So you might as well put on the music that you like and try to get yourself to enjoy it. Because if we have to do things, then we should try to find a way to do it in an enjoyable way. Now, in order to be joyful, we really need to practice gratitude. And it's important, again, for us to focus on what we have and not what we're missing. And when we see that others have way more than us, and we say, maybe I have what I need, but how come so-and-so has so much more and has a much better life and has more talents and has more things going their way? Am I not deserving? What makes them better than me? And at that time, it's important to tell ourselves, and if we tell ourselves enough times, it will hopefully sink in, I accept God's will. And we know that every person was created for a mission. And it's like, you know, in my school, Rabbi Shanowitz always has this line that he says to kids, like, if he makes a special privilege for a certain kid, that the kid will have a certain, like, chart because they need that extra incentive. And another kid says, well, it's not fair. How come that kid gets a chart and I don't? And Rabbi Shanowitz will tell the kid, well, that child needs it. But if there's anything that you need that I'm not aware of, tell me what your needs are and I'll accommodate you. And usually that just ends the story and that's it. But it's like someone in a nursing home saying, you know, how come you gave that person this food and you gave me that food? Well, for you, salt is not a problem, but for her, it is. So each of us have a different mission in this world to accomplish because God didn't create anyone by mistake. So every one of us has a mission that no one else can accomplish and only we could. And that mission might be as small as smiling to a certain person to make their day. We don't know what our mission is, so we have to try to accumulate as many mitzvot as possible every day, so with the hope that we're going to accomplish our mission. But we have everything that we need to accomplish our mission. So if we don't have something, and it's not fear because someone else has it, then that means that we don't need it to fulfill our mission in this world. And if you do experience feelings of jealousy and it's not fear, that's okay. Don't bash yourself because it's one of the 10 commandments. You should not be jealous, the last one. So if it wasn't such a common human flaw, then it wouldn't have been one of the 10 commandments. The fact that God has to highlight it is because this is the tendency that we have, that when we see someone having more than us, you know, you can give child A a lolly, and then you give child B a lolly, and child A is not happy anymore because why did child B also get it? Only I'm supposed to get it. This is in a little child, but we see that same thing throughout life. Just adults are just more sophisticated about covering that up. Okay, so it's also very important for us to appreciate people in order to make us happier. And, you know, there's constantly people around us that serve us, and we don't even take a moment to realize that. You know, from the farmers to the mailman to the medical researchers, and the person who's doing medical research, for all we know, he may be searching and finding a cure that may save our life one day. And it's really important to be more aware of the world around us and show more appreciation for services that people do. I remember when the mailman would come to my house, my mother always gave him gifts, like a couple of times a year, and she'd always thank the mailman from the bottom of her heart, saying that I'm a homebound woman, and you can't imagine the great deed that you do by bringing me mail every day, because I'm from Israel. I'm the only child in America. My mother came to America because medical treatment was way better here. And her parents and all her siblings lived in Israel. And she would tell the mailman, you help me keep in touch with all of my family members and friends. And it was before the emailing and the internet and all of that. And the mailman felt very important and appreciated. And it's a fact that when you make someone feel good, it makes you feel good. If you show appreciation to somebody, it doesn't only make that person feel good, it gives you a positive feeling too. Now all this is beautiful, but what happens on a hard day in the heat of the moment, when things are going wrong? And for that, Hasidic philosophy tells us there's a rule that a Jew must follow, that mind controls the heart. The heart is a beautiful thing. The heart is passionate. The heart is full of pleasure. The heart is wild. It's colorful. It gives us so much energy. But there's only one thing that the heart is missing. The heart has no direction. And so if we follow our heart to make decisions, then it's equivalent to the horses leading the wagon driver. And everybody thinks that's absurd, that the wagon driver gets onto his horse and buggy and he's letting the horse lead him. It just, nobody would accept that as normal, but that's what we do when we make our decisions based on our hearts. The definition, the characteristics of the mind is the 3 C's. A mind is calm, a mind is clear, and a mind is consistent. And that's what it takes for, in order to be able to control the heart. This rule of a Jew is supposed to have mind controlling the heart. I once heard that same analogy with parents and children, that children are compared to the heart and parents are the mind. So when your child is having a really full-blown tantrum, they're doing an excellent job. They're doing exactly what they're supposed to do, because that's the personality of the heart. They're full of passion, they're full of energy, and they're colorful, and they're wild. Our job as a parent is to be the calm, the consistent, and clear. We're the mind controlling the children. So Rabbi Schneur Zalman, who lived over 200 years ago, he was the first Hasidic master. He wrote the holy book of the Tanya. And the Tanya is the guideline. The Tanya is the guideline to all of Hasidic philosophy and a lot of Kabbalah. And he said, how could you control your mind when a very destructive and negative thought comes to your mind? And the way the Rabbi Schneur Zalman describes it is, he says, you need to push away the thought with 2 hands. You have to push it away with 2 hands. And what does that mean with 2 hands? So he explains like this with an analogy. Pretend you have a nudge that comes to your house. And you have a nudge that comes to your door, and this nudge is someone that is really not pleasant, and you don't want this person to come to your house. So you have 3 choices. Choice A is, well, he knocked on the door, so I don't have a choice. I have to let him in. And you open the door and you let him in. That's choice A. And you can be sure that this nudge is going to keep on, this nag is going to keep on coming again and again to your house because you gave him the attention that he was looking for. The second choice is you can push this nudge away with 1 hand, which means you can keep the door locked. You're not opening the door, but you keep on yelling through the door, I'm not letting you in, I'm not letting you in, go away, you can't come. And you keep on standing at the door for an hour saying, I'm not letting you in. And the person did end up coming in, but the person's going to come again, because there are people in this world, many people, that will take negative attention rather than no attention. And so you gave it negative attention. You were preoccupied. You couldn't do anything else because you were busy. Your mind was occupied with this nudge at the door, and the nudge will come again. And then the third option is pushing him away with both hands, which is he knocks on the door and you quickly go upstairs and you put the music blasting and you start folding laundry. And he's not there, and there's no reaction. And eventually, when there's no reaction, the person leaves. And the Rabbi Shneur Zalman calls that the two-hand push. So when we have a negative thought that comes to our mind that's either negative or destructive or just really wears us down and makes us feel sad, we have to push it away with two hands. And that means that we have to almost like visually think in your mind that there's a stop sign. Sometimes some people are very visual, and you say stop, and you just interrupt the thought right away, but it's not enough to interrupt the thought. You have to replace it right away with a different thought, because if you don't, the thought is going to come back. Since a person can't really think about two different things at the same time, you kind of have to have in your toolbox these positive thoughts and that you can kind of pull out that are good memories that just make you smile when you think about it. You know, like we all have those associations we make. There's a certain song that every time I hear it, I think about a certain wedding that I went to. You know, we all have those associations. So if you can hold on to like some positive, good moments that as soon as the negative thought comes that you know is destructive, you can stop it right there. Now, some of you are going to say it's not possible when you're so heated up. But you know what? All of you can think of a moment where you were really angry about something and you were ready to yell at every person that was in sight, and suddenly the phone rang and you ran to pick it up, and it was a good friend that you didn't speak to in a long time, and you find yourself chatting for a half hour with that friend, and then you get off the phone and you suddenly realize, hey, for the last half hour I wasn't angry. But I was burning mad just before the phone rang. And if you start thinking about that negative thought, you can bring back the anger again, maybe not to the same intense degree because time passed, and time is a wonderful gift. But it's amazing to think that the phone call calmed you down because it distracted you. So the whole time that you had that phone conversation, you weren't thinking about anything else. You weren't thinking about that which was bothering you. You were having the phone conversation. So that just shows us how powerful that is. And remember, when we started the class, I said that joy is the key to our soul, that joy is the key to our neshama. Well, the same way that joy is the key to our neshama, the mind is the key to our hearts. And the mind controls your heart. You can't say, well, it's feelings, I can't control them. No, your mind is what controls your feelings. Like we said, the valuation of the event, the way your mind evaluates it, that's how your heart is going to react. And we know that for certain because there's that expression, ignorance is bliss. You know, Nebuch, a child who is not well or whose mental capacity is very weak, you'll find that they're always very happy. Why are they happy? Because they don't have the intelligence to understand their situation. And it's a known fact that the smarter people are, the deeper they experience pain, because they understand their situation on a much deeper level. And that's how you can also see a lot of times when a terrible tragedy happens, that somehow the younger kids are more resilient and they bounce back more than the adults, because they don't really realize, the person died, that they're really, not going to see that person again. They don't realize the extent and the depth of the event that took place. So we definitely see, based on that connection between the mind and the heart, that our mind definitely controls how we feel. Another way to help ourselves in negative thoughts is, don't think, what do I need? And it's not fear, I'm not getting what I deserve, or people are not being kind to me. Think not what I need, I'm on the second column now, but the second column on the first page, but where I am needed. And if you constantly have that focus, then you won't be self-centered and you won't have self-pity, because you're taking the attention off of yourself. You're not asking yourself, what do I need? It's more, how can I help others? What am I needed for? And automatically that makes a person feel better. Anger is a feeling that God made, so why shouldn't it be allowed? Well, every person experiences anger, but anger is very expensive. A very expensive emotion, and we pay a very big price for it. The Torah says that anger is equivalent to idol worship. Now that's powerful to say that. I mean, to say that when a person is angry, it's as if they're serving idols. How could we say that? And the reason is that a person who's serving idols doesn't believe that God is the one and only creator, and he serves idols too. Well, when you're angry about something that happened to you, then you have your own idols too, because that means that you're not consciously aware that everything that happens to you is from the one and only God. So then you're not only serving God, you're serving yourself, or you're serving other idols. You're serving money, you're serving whatever the thing is that's getting you upset. It says here, God is the author of your life. It's very important. There are many times where people cannot let go and they can't forgive. They can't. And they say, this person destroyed my life. Or this store that just opened up and was a competitor just ruined my whole business. I cannot forgive. I can't move forward because this person destroyed my life. And it's important to realize that when you can't forgive a person, in a way, you're giving them so much power. What you're doing is you're saying that they're the author of your life. You know, so-and-so wronged you and hurt you so badly, and therefore you just can't bring yourself to forgive them. But you're saying that they ruined your life. So they are the author writing out the script of your life. They're deciding what your life is and controlling how your life could have been and will be and is. And it's important to say, God is the author of my life. Now, this person definitely wronged me. What this person did was not okay, but let that person take it up with God. You know? That person has to repent and God will forgive them. But for myself, I have to say, this pain was pain that I was meant to go through in order to grow and become the person I have to be. And for whatever reason, God allowed this person to be the messenger to bring me this pain. Now, this person was not allowed to do it, and this person has to work it out with God. But I forgive this person because this person is not the author of my life. And it's very powerful to keep on reminding yourself that God is the author of your life, and God is the one that controls what happens. When you forgive, you will feel so much better, because when we are angry at a person and we can't forgive, we're giving them rent-free space in our brain. They're taking up our brain. So when we forgive, it's giving... It's fine. Okay. It's giving us that free space and that peace of mind. Now, based on everything we've said, is there any room, according to the Torah, for sadness? We said earlier, a Jew is obligated to be happy. A Jew is obligated to be happy for God. A Jew is obligated to be happy for himself and for his family. We said that there's no reason to be upset because everything that God does is for the good, even if we don't perceive it as good. So is there room for sadness? And yes, there definitely is. Because sometimes, there are people that would never survive if not for the last minute. Some people do very well under pressure. Some people don't. Some people need to, in order to thrive in life, they do need to have that down moment. It's like the person who only appreciates water after they were in the desert and were deprived of water. And then when their thirst is quenched, they realize how valuable water is. Sometimes we do need to have a down in order to have a greater up. It's almost like the analogy that when you're cleaning out a drawer and you empty, you dump the whole drawer on the floor to organize it, and your kid comes into the room and says, "Ma, why are you making such a mess?" And you say, "No, I'm organizing the drawer." But when they come in, they just see that you created a bigger mess. Well, sometimes you've got to go backwards in order to go forwards. There is a lot of times these people that are racing, or they'll kind of take they'll go a few steps back in order to be able to make that greater leap, that jump start, or however you call it. So there's definitely room for sadness. And even in the Torah tells us that there's grief when a loved one dies. The Torah even has laws about grieving, that there's mourning. You're supposed to be sad. You're supposed to have grief and mourn. So there's definitely room for mourning. And the Kabbalah gives us, Hasidic philosophy gives us 4 guidelines for sadness. When you're feeling down and sad, you have to make sure that it's a sadness that's healthy and that is going to be a springboard for greater happiness. So sadness is allowed. Depression is not. How do you, and by the way, everything in this class obviously is assuming that a person, we're not talking about any biochemical issue. Thank God there is medication for that, and just like a person would take medication for a heart issue, they need to take medication for that. I'm talking about the average human being on the face of this earth. Another way to say life is struggle. I mean, nobody lives the face of this earth without struggle. So everyone has down moments. And how do you know when your sadness and down or your negative feeling is okay? So the 4 guidelines are in this little chart over here. If while you're feeling sad, you feel that you're more giving and you feel more sensitive, like a person who, God forbid, has a child who has childhood cancer, and the person becomes so much more sensitive to other sick people and other parents of children that are sick, and the person just becomes more giving and a better listener and more caring, that kind of sadness is okay. The person is sad, but the person is in a more giving mode and the person is more sensitive. So that would be okay. The depression feeling is when the person becomes very self-centered and a lot of self-pity and can't think beyond himself or herself and can't think that there's a world out there with other people that also have pain. They could only see themselves. That's a red flag. That we have to stay away from. Another difference is that when a person is sad, there's a lot of emotions. They're very emotional. They cry a lot. There's movement. I always wonder, I think I'm used to in Hebrew, every word, there's no such thing as random. There's the word coincidence is not in the Jewish lexicon. There is no such a thing as coincidence. And in Hebrew, if a word, 2 words have like a similar letters, those words are related and connected to each other. I wonder if the word emotions comes from being in motion. I don't know. It's just a theory I have. Because when a person is emotional, there's movement. There's a lot of energy. They're tired afterwards. Whereas the depressed person doesn't have a lot of emotion. They're lazy. They don't want to get out of bed. They're not productive. They just is. The third difference is the person who's sad is very future oriented. They're going through an illness and they're praying and they're hoping that they're going to get better one day, and they're searching and they're very sad and worried, but they're searching frantically for a cure. So although they're sad, they're looking towards a future, whereas the person that's depressed doesn't look towards the future, only living in the past. And the last difference is that sadness is temporary and depression is more long-lasting. It's interesting that if you look as a model at the Torah's guidelines when a person dies, you see how the Torah says it's okay to be sad, but the intensity has to lessen. So first there's that first day when a loved one dies, a person is not obligated to do any mitzvot that day. They don't have to daven. They don't have to pray that day because they may not feel up to praying to the God that just took their loved one. And then after their loved one is set to rest, then there's a week. That's why it's called Shiva, because Shiva means 7. And there's a week of mourning. And that's also a very intense time where you're not supposed to do anything for yourself. You're not even supposed to cook for yourself or people are supposed to be there for you. You don't leave the house. You stay in the home the whole time. Then it gets a little intense. You have to slowly move forward a little. And then there's something called the Shloshim, which is the first month. Like the first month, one does not get any haircuts, and there's many other laws. After the Shloshim, after the month, one may get a haircut, but there's still the whole year where they're not allowed to listen to live music, and there's many other signs of mourning to show that they're in sadness. So, and mourning ends after 11 months, not after a year. The first yard site is on a year later on the day the person passed. But mourning is 11 months, and there's many different reasons given, but the reason I'm going to give you is pertaining to what we're speaking about, that a year may be already counted as something which is like more permanent, more long-lasting. 11 months is still considered less than a year. It's a temporary situation. Now, it's important also when we wrote temporary that sadness has to be in small doses. It's almost like antibiotic. Antibiotic is a wonderful thing. It cures us from terrible infections. But nobody in their right mind is going to say, I'm going to keep on drinking bottles of antibiotic because it's amazing. It cures us of infections. We know that antibiotic has to be in very small doses because if we take too much, it can be harmful too. So sadness is okay. And when a person before Yom Kippur is making a calculation, kind of like an inventory of how their year went, there's going to be sad feelings coming up and guilt feelings coming up because we all, had different situations that we wish we didn't do, and there's regret, and regret is not a very happy feeling, and that's okay because that's a springboard for growth. But it's in small doses. It can't be. You can't let it drag on. And the other thing that it says here under the chart is that sadness needs to be in the right time and place. Imagine if someone heard that fasting on Yom Kippur is such a great mitzvah that they decide, you know what? I want to do this mitzvah. I'm even going to fast on Purim. Everybody would understand that in their right mind, it's not a mitzvah to fast on Purim. Or to say giving tzedakah is such a mitzvah that I'm going to make sure to give a lot of charity, a lot of tzedakah on Shabbos. You're not supposed to handle money on Shabbos. So a mitzvah done in the wrong time and place does not equal to a mitzvah. I remember when I was a kid, I think I was a 4th or 5th grader, I was writing a letter in class to my older sister in Israel, and the teacher pulled it away from me, and I said, I was just writing a letter to my older sister. And she said, yeah, but it was in the wrong time and place. So it's beautiful to do the right things, but only if they're in the right time and place. And the same thing with sadness. We need to be able to have that mind control, that when you're at work or when you're dealing with your children, there's certain times that's not the right time to deal with the sadness. And if one doesn't have the control to remove themselves and even tell their children, I need some time out, and to do it in the right time and place. It's also important to have self-knowledge. A person needs to know themselves. Almost imagine that you have your own toolbox. That's really what you need to have. A toolbox, when something breaks, you right, take the toolbox out to fix. Every person has their own toolbox that they know works for them when they're starting to feel those down feelings, or somebody wronged them, or the worry feelings, or the Jewish guilt feelings. So I put in parentheses some examples. For some people, music does it. For some people, walking is very therapeutic, or reading a book, or reading something inspirational in a magazine, listening to an inspiring class. For me, cleaning does it, If my mind is cluttered, but I quickly start cleaning, because the kitchen is clean, somehow my mind is less cluttered and cleaner too. Also, some people say a long hot shower does it. You have to know yourself. You have to know, your tools, what makes you feel good, and when you feel relaxed from something, kind of put that into your toolbox and know, that works for me. Because for everybody, things work differently. There's one thing that could be in your toolbox that works for everybody, and that's acts of kindness. It's a fact that when you do someone a favor, it makes you feel better. When you smile to someone, they smile back. When you help someone, when you listen to someone, automatically it gives you a positive feeling. It's also important when we talk about self-knowledge to know your negative triggers. Those of you who don't know it, ask your children, because they know it. When your child wants something, they know exactly which buttons to push. They know, what gets you frustrated, and they know, what makes you lose it. And you'll say, okay, you can have it, So they know what your negative triggers are. So if you don't know, then you need to ask them. But you need to know if a negative trigger is when you have a lack of sleep, that when you walk around exhausted, you get very moody and mean, then you have to stay away from that negative trigger, and you have an obligation, because we have an obligation to serve God with happiness, you have an obligation to make sure that you get the sleep that you need. And if there's a certain person that being around them just makes you feel very negative because this person's ways of acting or this person's talk, remember we said earlier that a person needs to always speak and act joyously. So if there's somebody that always speaks with a lot of sarcasm and negative, and you feel that it's contagious and you feel that you're being pulled into it, then you have to stay away from that. Or at least you can go there, but when you're starting to feel down, you know that that's a trigger and you have to remove yourself from those negative triggers. And everyone knows what their negative triggers are to stay away from it. Some people, eating certain foods are a negative trigger. Makes them tired, makes them just feel, not good. So whatever your negative triggers are, stay in tune and stay away from them. It's important to transform your problems into goals. Like what we said before, let's say a person is extremely disorganized. Instead of putting yourself down and saying, I'm such a disorganized person, you can say, my goal in life is to become more organized. So all of your problems need to be replaced into goals. It's also important, children learn by example. That's one of the reasons why I think I'm a calmer and more patient parent with 7 kids than I was with 2. Because when there were only 2 kids under 2 years old, I didn't think that I really had people watching me the whole time. They were little kids that, don't really understand when their mother's in a bad mood. But as you have teenagers, you can't say, do what I tell you, but don't do as I act. When you say, oh, come on, so something that went wrong, it's okay. You didn't get into the college that you applied for, so there's worse things in life, to handle it. But then they see you losing your mind over little things, so you're telling them to handle things well, but then you don't handle things well. Mm. And we know, all of us know that we can almost hear our mother's voices in our mind. It's like a vicious cycle from generation to generation. We do what we heard, and our children are going to do exactly what we do. This morning, my 5-year-old Esther climbed onto the counter to see, because she knew there was something here today, and she knew there had to be good things in the cabinet, and she's climbing on the counter, and I said, Esther, get down! And she says to me, Mommy, I don't like when you yell. And I looked at her, and I said, Esther, thank you for pointing out to Mommy that Mommy was yelling. Mommy's really working on speaking in a lower tone of voice. You're so precious to me. I love you so much that I got so worried when I saw you doing something dangerous. But I'm going to continue to work on speaking in a lower tone of voice. It's okay. We could admit to our kids that we did something wrong. That's okay. We want our kids to be able to take ownership of their wrongdoing and to apologize. And we're not perfect. So if we do something wrong, it's okay for us to admit it and take ownership for it. And it's important for us to love ourselves. It says love yourself. And that's why you can't do all that negative talk to yourself. It's important to love yourself because we are told, the Torah tells us, love your fellow as yourself. So someone who doesn't love themselves really cannot love other people. Because you can't love other people if you don't love yourself. Because the Torah says, love your fellow as you love yourself. If you don't love yourself, then you can't truly love others. So it's important, those that are able to forgive themselves and be kind to themselves will be able to extend that to others and also forgive others and be kind to themselves. Treat others the way you want to be treated. It says here on the bottom, why weren't you Zusha? There was once a great rabbi whose name was Zusha, and he was very sad. He was worried that he didn't do what he was supposed to, that he didn't accomplish his mission in this world. And he said to his students, I'm not worried one day, after 120 years when I have to return to my Maker, I'm not worried that God will ask me, how come you weren't like Moses? But I'm worried that he'll ask me, how come you weren't the Zusha that you can be? So God doesn't compare anybody. And naturally, everyone makes comparisons. Sometimes it's important to make comparisons. If I'm deciding which school to send my son to next year, I have to look at different schools and I have to compare them. So in life, we always have to make comparisons. You're going shopping for a dress and you're comparing the two items. But we have to be careful that although it's one of the skills that our minds use is to make choices, to compare. We can't compare our children and we can't compare what we have to others because that will give us a negative feeling. And also, God doesn't judge. God is a very fair judge. God doesn't judge you and size you compared to somebody else. So if somebody, for example, was born into a Torah home where they were born into it, their whole life they observed mitzvot, and they don't even think twice before eating kosher food because they never tasted anything else other than that, the expectations would be very different than someone else who is breaking themselves to take on that mitzvah. So on God's scale, a person that does many less mitzvot than another person may be on a much higher level spiritually than the person who leads a fully Torah life, because God judges from where you came from to where you progressed. Almost as a teacher, looking at her perfect student that's always getting 90s and made it to a 95, that child did not progress this year as much as the child who was a failing child that made it to 75. So in the same way, that's the way God judges us. I wrote here, bounce back. There's no way, I'm the first one to raise my hand and say that all of these things that I'm saying tonight are things that I'm working on. I have not mastered any of them. It's a lifetime mastery. And, no matter how masterful you become with accessing joy, it's inevitable that you're going to have down days. It's inevitable that every single one of us are going to have our days that we fall. Crisis hits or just, very overwhelming situations, and it's okay when you have your down day. And you tell yourself, I had my down day because I'm not an angel. I'm a human being. If I never had downs, then I wouldn't be a human. I would be an angel. And it's okay as long as we remember that we have to bounce back. We have to bounce back. Tomorrow is a new day, and it starts again completely, because we can't let ourselves ever hit rock bottom, because that's when it gets very complicated. I want to read to you, which is funny that I have this, because I am not a saver. I love throwing out. I hate clutter. I love space. So, every week when I throw out the garbage, the more garbage bags psychologically that are in the garbage can, I think the cleaner my house is. But surprisingly, I found a paper from many years ago, a little workshop that I gave to 9th graders, and they had to describe a fearful or angry or sad event that happened and how they dealt with it. So I'm just going to read to you 2 of them. This is pre-computer days, and it's all handwritten. They had to write the event that happened. Then they had to write how they got worked up. It's interesting, even the way that expression in English, I'm getting all worked up. Your mind is here and your heart is here. A person has to have their mind controlling their heart. When your heart is in control, then you're worked up, because your heart is working its way up and controlling your mind. Then you have to work down. So, and then in the next circle, they had to write how they worked themselves down, and then they had to endorse themselves. Give yourself that pat on the back. You deserve it. You got to compliment yourself. So I'll read to you what it was. My best friend, this is in a very Jewish community. My best friend forgot to pick me up on her way to shul as we planned. So this was this 9th grade girl's sad event that happened that week. My first reaction was that she no longer wants to be my best friend. I felt like crying and not going to shul at all. I had a lump in my throat and I felt very worthless and insulted. Then she's describing how she worked herself down. I reminded myself that she did not stop by last Shabbos. That she did stop by last Shabbos. Maybe she forgot. Nobody's perfect. I made up this whole story in my mind about a last-minute emergency that kept my friend from coming. That way I was able to wear a mask. That was the terminology I used. Wear a mask of happiness and confidence in our friendship. I forced myself to put on my coat and walk the 4 blocks to shul all by myself. At shul, I found out that my friend had a bad headache and couldn't go out. I endorsed myself for not judging my friend without having all the facts, and for going to shul in spite of my mood. And then I'll read another one. My mother asked me to babysit on the night that we had a class exciting gathering. My first reaction was that she doesn't even care about me and the things that are important to me. My head started to pound and my cheeks were hot. I felt like screaming about how unfair it is that she always asks me to do everything and not my sister. So she's worked up. Now she's working down. I forced myself to take a deep breath and close my lips. I reminded myself that last week my mother took me shopping and left my sister at home to babysit. I realized that with 8 kids, she can't always remember all of our class events and parties. I forced myself to ask in a low voice, do you think I can watch the kids earlier and still get to my class gathering at 8:30? My mother apologized and thanked me for reminding her about my plans in such a nice way. I endorsed myself for treating my mother with respect while still making my points. I endorsed myself for not spoiling the whole evening with an angry outburst. Beautiful 9th graders. Children are beautiful, and they learn these skills a lot faster than us. Well, everything tonight was like a big crash course because there's so much more to say, and I just scratched the surface of this. But I do want to say that this coming Shabbos is Rosh Chodesh, and we begin the month of Adar, and Adar is the happiest month of the year, and it's amazing. I still have 4 minutes left. It's amazing that there's so many months in the year that have holidays, yet this month of Adar has only one holiday, and it's a one-day holiday, Purim, and it's the only month of the year that the holiday in that month is so powerful that it affects the entire month, and it's called the happy month on the Jewish calendar. I mean, we don't see that Hanukkah and Sukkot and any of the other holidays does that this one holiday just makes it a happy month. And many rabbis ask that question, and there's many answers given to why the month of Adar is a happy month that we're entering. And it actually tells us in the Talmud, Mishenichnas Adar, there's many songs to these words, Mishenichnas Adar Marvin B'Simcha, which means as the month of Adar enters, we increase in our happiness. And when you think of Purim, I mean, the first thought that comes to my mind when I think of Purim is noise and candy and just junk and wildness. That's what comes to my mind. The gragger, the noise. I mean, when I think about Yom Kippur, I think about white and pureness. But Purim, I think about noise. Now, when you think about noise is conflict. Another way to say, when you're in conflict. Purim is our holiday. One holiday that we do not say the prayer of Hallel. Purim is the one holiday that did not take place in the land of Israel. So the Jewish people were at a low point in history during the story of Purim. And yet, it's the greatest holiday, and it lights up the whole month of Adar, and the whole month of Adar is a happy month. Why? Because how do you know when your relationship with someone is solid? Not when you're at a high, because highs don't last. It's when you're at a low point, if the relationship could still endure, then you know that it's a solid relationship. We were at such a low in Jewish history at that time, and our relationship with God was still so solid that's what we celebrate. That was evidence and proof that the Jewish people's relationship with God is solid, because even in a down, even when we were in exile, we were not in Israel, even at a low point, we were able to connect to God and trust in Him, and God responded with this miracle. Now, it says that people who have a court case scheduled, or if you were speeding and you have to go to court for a speeding ticket, it says that the month of Adar is a good time to deal with all that. It is like a special luck. So it's very, it's divine providence, like I said, that the word coincidence is not in the Jewish lexicon. It's really divine providence that we're having this class today. I chose to do this class because it's my birthday today, and it's the end of the month of Shvat, but we're entering this weekend the month of Adar. And the paper that you're taking home, this outline, I do want to say that this was recorded, that we're going to run CDs. Everybody that's here today is going to get the CD, and all those people that were not able to make it due to sick children and the weather and whatever else was their conflict, will also get the CD. Someone called me today and said that they're having a very hard day and it's impossible to juggle going out again. And I said, well, this class is about challenges. So if it's causing you to have another challenge in life to come out today, then don't come. So we're not looking for more challenges in life. Although challenges make us grow and become a better person, at the same time, every day in our morning prayers, we pray to God and we say, please don't give us challenges. So we don't ask for them, because we're scared. We don't know if we're going to pass the test. Once we're given them, we know that God gave us the tools to deal with them. But I do want to say that with the month of Adar coming this weekend, and this only being the tip of the iceberg, this is really just scratching the surface. Rabbi Greenberg is, we're starting 6 classes. I'm going to be giving 2 of them, only because Rabbi Greenberg's out of town. Otherwise, I don't step into his shoes. Rabbi Greenberg is going to be giving 4, but the topics are going to be on the Kabbalah of gratitude and joy. So that is going to be more of a step-by-step leading you and giving you the tools and meditations to lead a happy and joyful life. This class is going to be on Sunday mornings from 11 to 12. It's starting this Sunday. It's also being repeated on Tuesday evenings because some people's Sunday mornings don't work out. So it's given twice a week. There are people that sign up for the Sunday class and missed it one Sunday because they were out of town and know that they always can make a makeup because it's given twice a week. So it's going to be again on Tuesday. And this is going to be a much broader and deeper discussion of everything we discussed today.